Oh, sorry. Can you hear me? Can you hear me there? Oh, hello there. Welcome. My name's Paul, and I am journeying into space, and we are going to go on a journey into space together. And what we're going to do is do a series of experiments. I'm going to share some things with you, and we're going to work out how we get to space, how we survive in space. It's a little bit of a clue here, and then how we return home from space safely. And I'm going to share with you some of the history of space and some of this sort of physics and chemistry and biology of space. So let's start with where we are going. I'm going to share something with you first of all. So this should hopefully come up with you. Nice, there we go. Right. So we're going to space, and there we go. And we're going to the International Space Station. Of course, the International Space Station is our base in space. This is where astronauts currently go and work and research and live in space. And here we're learning to live in space. We're learning how to do long duration missions because we want to go to really interesting places like the moon and Mars. And so the space station is our way of learning how to live there in a safe environment, somewhere that's, you can see in this picture, just above the surface of the Earth, only 250 miles up. Something goes wrong, it doesn't take much to get home again. But it's still an interesting, dangerous environment to work in. And that's what we're going to explore, is how you get up to this thing, how you survive once you're there, perhaps avoiding toileting issues, and of course how you return from space and get back to Earth safely. So, well, who's been to space? Well, let's start with a couple of people. And here is hopefully someone you all know, someone you're all aware of. And this is, of course, pause for you all to say it, it is Major Tim Peake, and he's our current British astronaut. He went to the International Space Station in 2014, and he spent 6 months, actually it's 178 days in space, and here he is in the cupola, looking down on Earth, and he's got some seeds, packets of seeds that was returned to Earth, floating behind him there. And he did a series of experiments, 256 experiments in fact, through his stay, lots of research, some of it to do with medicine, some of it to do with combustion, things like that. And he's our current astronaut. There's only one astronaut in Britain. But he's not our first, of course. First astronaut was this lady here. This lady here was our first astronaut. You can see, wearing the same suit as I'm wearing here, this is Helen Sharman. And Helen Sharman is the first British astronaut. And she went to space in 1991 with Project Juno. And here she is getting out of the capsule, just returning from her mission to the Mir space station, which is different to the International Space Station. So if you want to see the Mir space station now, you can, but you'll need a submarine. It's at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, where it was crash landed. But how did these two people and all the other astronauts in history, how did they get to space? Well, of course, the answer is this kind of vehicle here. This is current rocket used to take astronauts to the International Space Station. It's now been joined by the American Dragon capsule. But this is the main rocket that takes astronauts there. 3 astronauts in the top there. This is the Soyuz rocket. And in this form is basically the rocket that's been used since the beginning by the Soviet Union and then Russia to take people to space. In fact, the early version, it's the R7, is what took the very first satellite and very first human to space. We'll talk about them later. So what we're going to do, I'm going to stop sharing this picture because we're going to have an experiment to look at how does it get into space? How does a rocket actually work? So I'm going to stop sharing this for you. The wonders of technology, and then hopefully you can now see me nice and big. And what we're going to do is an experiment explores how does a rocket engine actually work. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to fire a rocket engine for you right here. So I'm going to get my rocket engine. Is this? Yeah, I know. I can hear the disappointment going across the airwaves there. That this is not quite what you were expecting. Of course, you were expecting something with wires and pumps and sort of interesting bits and bobs. Oh, and this is just a big water bottle. Well, here's the thing. It is a big water bottle, so is a rocket. A rocket is basically a massive bottle. That picture, that Soyuz you saw taking off there, that is also a massive bottle. There is very little in a rocket, actually. Most of the stuff, the interesting stuff is at the top and the bottom. The top is, of course, where the capsule is and the cargo and the guidance computers and things that sort of make the rocket fly. And at the bottom are the engines. Everything between them, of course, is bottle full of rocket fuel. And that's what we're going to do here. I've got a large bottle here. What I'm going to do is I've got some rocket fuel here. I'm going to put some rocket fuel in here. Okay. And then we're going to blow it up. We're going to light it. So we need to start with 20. I need to make sure there we go, it's working. I'm going to put 20 good sprays, about 5 millilitres of fuel in it, and not a lot. So I'm going to put 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 17, 18, 19, 20. So one for luck. There we go. And then what I need to do is mix this fuel with the oxidizer. Of course, you need two things. You think of your fire triangle. Your fire triangle, how you make a fire. So you need fuel. I'll just put the fuel in there. You need oxygen or an oxidizer. Other oxidizers are available. In this case, we're using the oxygen that's in the air in the bottle already. And then, of course, we need a heat source. So I'm mixing this up to make sure it's all nicely. There we go. Oh, nice shot there. You can see that. And then I'm going to use this stick here. I'm going to use this torch here, which will come in later on as well. I'll light the end here. And then after a countdown, I'm going to light my rocket. So if you join in the countdown if you want. And we shall begin. So let's light the end here. There we go. So there's all it. So it'd be 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, ignition. And it's done. Did you like that? Well, here's the thing. Now you know what you're expecting. Should we do it again? And this time you can look more closely. So the problem is, and we'll talk about what's happened in the bottle in a moment, I've burned up all the oxygen. The oxygen here has reacted with the fuel. The fuel contains hydrogen, and we've had our reaction. So all the oxygen now, if I dropped, so I was cruel enough to drop some sort of creature in here, I put a mouse or something in here, it would actually die from the lack of oxygen in here. There's no oxygen in this bottle, it's all gone. And actually it'll take about 2 hours if I just leave it, the oxygen to sort of seep in and the oxygen concentration to get back to where it should be. It's about 2 hours. But so we need another bottle because this is out of oxidizer. So I'm going to put this aside over here and then I'm going to get another bottle. Okay, so we're going to do this again and I put those down and grab my fuel. So 20 good sprays. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. One for luck there. Then what we've got to do, of course, is shake up the rocket, make sure the fuel is nicely mixed with the oxidizer, and then place it on there. And make sure it's nice and secure. I don't want it flying off. And once I've got everything ready, got a fire extinguisher over there just in case. And we will light our impact. So, here we go. And it's 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, ignition. And we got a little bit of the fuel on the outside of the bottle there just burning off at the end. So, that, I just put this out before I burn everything down. There we go, make sure that's out. There we go. Right. Put those down. Right. So, what you saw there was the reaction between the rocket fuel. I'm going to pick up the cooler bottle now, so it's still quite hot. 2,000 degrees Celsius, that flame, so you don't want to grab it immediately. What you saw here was the reaction between the rocket fuel and the oxygen. So the fuel and the oxidizer reacted together and increased the pressure in here. Because, of course, explosions, what do explosions want to do? Think about an explosion. You see them in cartoons and films and things. Explosions want to grow. They want to go bigger. They want to get bigger in all directions. So what happens here is we trap it in what's called a combustion chamber. And so the hot gases, they're expanding, they're trying to get out, they're trying to increase in size, and they can't. They're trapped in this combustion chamber, so the pressure increases. And of course, you think about blowing up a balloon or blowing up your bicycle tire, you get the increased pressure because there's more gas in the volume there. And of course, if you put a hole in it, the gas rushes out, it expands. Well, same thing here. So not only have we got the expansion of the hot gas, but the increased pressure then forces everything through this one route of expansion, which is just here. Okay, and that allows us to take the energy of this reaction and make it directional. So this could then push the rocket along. Of course, I didn't push it along because I didn't turn this upside down. It wasn't this way round because, well, I didn't want to burn down the room I'm in or set fire to myself because this would have lifted off. You'd have seen it lift off. It would have looked epic. Wow, that's amazing, Paul. That's brilliant. And then you would have noticed I was on fire and was running around with my fire extinguisher trying to put everything out. So I didn't do that. I'm not here for all entertainment. So there's something else going on in here, though. We need to talk about chemistry. And so that's sort of the physics of the expansion and the gases coming out of this nozzle. But what we need to think about is what's happened in here. What happened to the rocket fuel? Because it's now gone. It's been turned into something else in a chemical reaction. And what we have, where my cup go? There it is. What we've got is we created something, a product, as we call it in chemistry. And the product in this is something, if you mix water, if you mix oxygen, there's only a little bit because it's a warm day, but if you mix hydrogen and oxygen together, you get water. And it's still condensing because it's quite a warm day today, so of course it's not condensing very quickly. If I try the other one, I'll do a little bit more in here. So if I show you, there we go. Look, there's a little bit of water there. It's not much. Sometimes on a colder day you get a lot more because it condenses much more quickly. But there's our water. And if I show you to the camera, if I show, here we go. Look, you should be able to see in there without me pouring all over my computer. There we go. There's some water in there. No, I'm not going to drink it. It's full of all sorts of other nasties and the sort of unspent rocket fuel and hydrocarbons and things like that. So I don't want to drink that. But what we've got is rockets are actually making water on takeoff. So if I share our picture again, and then we can talk about what we can do with a rocket. So I'm just going to share this back with you. And here we go. So if you look at that picture of that Soyuz there, hopefully that's working. What you should see is you've got that reaction. That's what's happening at the bottom, and everything else, that whole rest of that picture, everything under that white section at the top, basically fuel. 300 tons of the kind of fuels we've just been looking at, reacting together in those combustion chambers at the bottom. 27 of them on the bottom of this rocket, to lift this up into space, to get it to orbital speed, 17,500 miles an hour, in order for it to stay in orbit around the Earth and take our crew to the space station. So that's our rocket and how we take off. But what can we do with this rocket? What is this technology all about? It's a bit of history now. And well, here's the first thing we put into space. I mentioned earlier with the R7, the very first rocket, was very much like the Soyuz. Soyuz descended from it. And this is the very first spaceship, essentially. This is the first thing that we flung into space and stayed in space for a while, for 1,440 orbits, in fact, of the Earth. And this is Sputnik 1. Now, I have a theory. Okay, I have a theory about scientists. And this is that they are brilliant people, clearly, but that they are rubbish at naming things. They're really, really poor at naming things. And Sputnik sounds really cool, doesn't it? Sputnik's brilliant. Sputnik's like, this is the space race. This is, and sort of, it's the idea of spaceships. Sputnik 1, brilliant. Do you know what it means? It's Russian. And in English, it means satellite. They built the first satellite, and they called it satellite. It was like they were stuck that day or something. It's like buying a dog and saying, I'll call it dog. Here's my cat, cat. So the very first spaceship, the first satellite, they called it satellite. Anyway, it's still brilliant. It's still brilliant. And it's actually not very big. It's a bit bigger than a basketball. And it had these 4 aerials on it. It was a radio, and it just sort of bleeped away. And it demonstrated that things could get into space and stay in space and go into orbit. And it demonstrated the principle of satellites. Well, talking of dogs and cats and things like that, what was the first thing we put, first living thing we put into space? Well, you'll see now, and you're probably kind of like, oh, it's a dog, or it's a cat, or it's a monkey, or well, no. The first living thing in space was, of course, fruit flies. Fruit flies were the first thing put into space in 1947. As early as that, just 2 years after World War II, the Americans fired a modified V-2 rocket. This is the kind of rockets that the Germans had built during the Second World War, and they put these fruit flies into space. They entered space, and then they parachute straight down. They didn't go into orbit at that point. They couldn't do orbital rocketry at that point, and they survived. They lived happily ever after, had families and things. It was wonderful. But fruit flies were actually the first living creature to be put into space and test the idea of space. Now, they're small. They're small and not very complex. I'm not doing down insects and flies for all the etymologists out there. That they are lovely, they're beautiful, they're wonderful, but there are bigger and more complex animals out there. And of course, flies aren't one of them. And what was the biggest, most complex animal that we put into space straight after this? Actually, only 4 years after this, the first big complex animal in space. You're all going to start shouting out, is it cat, is it monkey, is it dog? Well, it was. Well, it gets confusing, actually. Technically, it's a monkey. It is a monkey. Unfortunately, it was called Albert II. Now, there's a clue in there. Albert I didn't make it. And then Albert III definitely didn't make it. Albert IV didn't make it either. Albert V, Albert VI. Albert VI discovered the ground is really, really, really hard. He hit it at hundreds of miles an hour. What happened to Albert II? Well, Albert II did get to space. But Albert II didn't make it back. So, technically, it was an unsuccessful mission. So the first creature, that actually big animal, to get to space and actually survive was these two dogs here, Gypsy and Denzig, not the dogs you were thinking of. This is Gypsy and Denzig, who were Russian, and I love this picture because what it shows you is, I think, why Gypsy wasn't picked for the second mission. Gypsy is the one on the left, looking like slightly crazy, actually, and she went home as a family pet, whereas Denzig was noble. A bit more noble, a bit more dignified, went on a second mission, didn't make it back. Well, the dog you've probably heard of, the dog you're all thinking of, is, of course, this dog here. This is Laika. Now, Laika was the first orbital animal, not the first animal in space, not the first living creature in space, not even the first dog in space, but Laika was the first animal to go into orbit, to actually go around the Earth, not straight up and straight down, actually to go into orbit. Now, Laika, it's rubbish name time again. Okay, here we go again with the scientists. What did they call it? What does Laika mean? Laika means barker. They basically did get a dog and called it dog. I know. It also means lucky. It's a sort of lucky name. And Lucky Barker, and she was a street dog, so she was lucky. She was found on the streets of Moscow, eating out of bins and so they brought her home, and they trained her up, and then they put her in a rocket, Sputnik 2, blasted in space, where she wasn't that lucky because she was dead about 5 hours later, dying of heat exhaustion. There was no way the capsule was coming back anyway. It was always a one-way mission. So unfortunately, Laika kind of hero of the space race and showed that living things could get into orbit, but unfortunately didn't make it back. So if you're more a cat person, who's more a cat person? I bet there's many people in this audience who are cat people more than dog people. Well, you'll be pleased to know here is the first cat in space. The first cat in space is Felicity. Felicity was a French cat, and I'd like you to spare a moment for the scientist who put this cat in the rocket. If you've ever tried to take a cat to the vet and put it in the basket, you'll know what I'm talking about. That scientist suffered for his art. Well, this cat was put in a rocket and was blasted into space and came home again, unlike Laika. And for 2 months was a celebrity space cat in France. You see, if you look at the bottom of the picture there, signed autographs. She signed autographs. You get an autograph from the celebrity space cat. Well, after 2 months, they put her down and took her brain out. I'm sorry about that. It's all about the science. It was about the science of what happens to brains in space, what happens in the sort of radiation, brain tissue, and radiation of space. And back then, we didn't have MRI scanners. We couldn't look at her brain in the same way we looked at astronauts' brains today. So people like Tim Peake, we look at their brains to check that it survived the mission, but we don't take an ice cream scoop and take his brain out. In fact, but back in 1962, that wasn't a possibility. So poor old Felicity also suffered for the space race. Well, of course, many of you said monkeys and chimpanzees and things like that for the beginning of the first animals, and of course we need to talk about the chimp, the first chimpanzee in space, the great ape, the first of the great apes. We're great apes. Here is the first great ape to go to space, and this is Ham the chimp. Look at that face. Yes, I've been to space. I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. Well, Ham tested out the Mercury capsule, which was the first capsule the Americans used, and just before the humans went to space, actually just before the very first human went to space, who was Russian, Ham went up, and Ham, that name again, Ham, why is it called Ham? It's the Holloman Aeromedical Center, HAM, Holloman Aeromedical Center. Rubbish name again. I know, scientists are naming things. They shouldn't be allowed to do it. But anyway, Ham did survive. They didn't put him down. They didn't scoop his brain out. And Ham retired and lived for another 23 years in various retired homes with chimps and zoos and things. So happy ending there. Last question on the animals, which is always a surprising one. who were the first Earthlings to go to the moon? Now, the first Earthlings to go to the moon. Some of you are going, oh, Neil Armstrong, first human to step foot on the moon. Of course, even the crew of Apollo 11 weren't the first humans to go to the moon. The crew of Apollo 8 actually were the first humans to go to the moon. They did land, but they went round the moon in Christmas 1968. And they were followed later on by Apollo 10, who also did this kind of dress rehearsal for Apollo 11 without actually landing. So already, by the time Neil Armstrong and Michael Collins and Buzz Aldrin had been to the moon, or went to the moon, 6 other humans had already been there. They just hadn't landed. But they were all beaten. They were all beaten by these other Earthlings. And these other Earthlings were tortoises 22 and 37. Here they are, Russian tortoises that were sent to the moon, went round the moon in a capsule called Zond 5. They went round 10 times, and they came home, and this is like the rubbish names again, 22 and 37. But they survived. They came home and proved that animals could go through things like the Van Allen radiation belt and get to the moon and come home again. And here they are. These little tortoises were our first ambassadors to another world. Anyway, enough of this series. We're going to talk about spacesuits. And as by way of introduction, what we're going to start with, well, of course, it's the first human in space, the first spacesuit ever used, and it's related to what I'm wearing. It's actually a sort of, in a way, like the first version of it. And this is Yuri Alexeyev Gagarin, Major Gagarin, or Smiler to his friends. This is Yuri Gagarin, the first human to go to space. Of course, let's forget that not long afterwards, my clicker stopped working. Look at that. Technical difficulties, even with space travel. Come on then. There should be a nice picture of. Hopefully that's worked. Valentina Tereshkova. And you haven't. It doesn't matter anyway. But it's a picture of the first woman in space. Valentina Tereshkova, wearing a modified version of Yuri Gagarin's suit. And what we're going to talk about is why do we wear spacesuits? Why have I got this gubbins on? What is it all about? Why do we need to wear spacesuits to go to space? And so, what we're going to do is think about. Move on to the next slide. Is here. Look, technical issues. It's always the way. If I just stop the share for a minute, let's try something else. There we go. Right, let me try. I'm going to do it for me, is it? No, of course. Anyway, hopefully what you should see now is a picture of the most famous spacesuit ever used, of course. It's the Apollo spacesuit. It's the suit that was used on the moon. And of course, this is a picture actually of Buzz Aldrin. Everyone thinks it's Neil Armstrong. Neil Armstrong is in the picture. You can see him reflected in the visor up there. He's taking the picture. His family, that's quite camera shy, Neil Armstrong. A very modest man. But here's Buzz Aldrin, the very famous picture of a man on the moon. And what we've got next, hopefully, is a picture you should see of 3 people. And these are the people who explain why we wear a spacesuit. And what you should notice, compared to what I'm wearing, compared to all the pictures you've seen before, they're not wearing spacesuits. Okay? They went to space at Soyuz 11, 1971, the 11th Soyuz capsule. Told you, been used for a long time. And they went to space with no spacesuits. They went, as you see them dressed here in this picture. And what happened? They were flying for 25 days. For 25 days, they were fine. Then something went wrong with their spaceship. They detached from the very first space station that they visited, Salyut 1. A valve broke. The valve that connects the capsule and the space station together to equalize the pressure, that broke. And it let all the air out into space. And these 3 became the only people so far, and metal, touch wood, not really superstitious, but the only people to die in space. And they ended up in a vacuum. They had no spacesuits, there was no air in the capsule. What killed them? And that's what we're going to look at now. We're going to do some experiments. I'm going to stop the share now, so you can see me. My computer will let me do it. Why are you being awkward? There we go. There we go. Computers. Never trust them. Right, so what we're going to do is an experiment about why you wear a spacesuit. Of course, the obvious answer is things like, well, you need to be able to breathe. You need to be able to breathe in here. You can probably just about hear me. I'll come a bit closer. You need to be able to breathe. I've got this helmet on, of course, so I can have air to breathe. And, well, we can scotch that sort of myth very quickly about whether that is actually what the problem is. Because if I get you all to hold your breath, so if I count to 3 and everyone watching, hold your breath. Go, 1, 2, 3. That's it, you're holding your breath. And I imagine none of you are passing out, and none of you, we can keep going. The record in the UK, by the way, is 7.5 minutes. So if you want to keep going, you've got 7.5 minutes to hold that breath for if you want to achieve the British record. So go. Yeah, you're not going to get there at the moment. But the point is, none of you have died. None of you have passed out. And what this shows is actually breathing is not the big issue. It's not the thing. If the air goes, you're not immediately like in the Hollywood, that doesn't happen. So something else is going on. Let's talk about wearing the whole suit. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you what happened to the crew of Soyuz 11. A little bit gruesome, but I'm doing it through the medium of marshmallows. Marshmallows, who knew they were so useful to the space industry? But here we go. Now I've got a bottle, a wine bottle here, full of marshmallows. You can see them all here, all nice and loose, all shaking about there. You can see them all there. Normal size little marshmallows you put on your hot chocolate. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the air out of this bottle. So I've got a vacuum pump here. So I've got a little valve here. I'm going to put in here. And then I'm going to take this pump here. And what it's going to do is this is going to suck all the air out of this bottle. And so simulate a capsule going into space and having all its air taken out. That's basically the same thing. So we imagine this is either lots and lots of human beings in here. We've got a quite big crew. Or, if you really want to sort of get to the root of it, this is all their internal organs. This is a human body. Perhaps think about it like this is a human body. These are all their bits inside. So watch what happens. Here we go. I'm going to put this here. I'm going to put this on here, and then I'm going to start pumping. So watch carefully what happens. Start drawing the air, and already, hopefully, you should be able to start to see something is happening in the bottle. Go past that quickly. Look, you can see what's happening from Mars now very, very, very clearly. And keep going. We're going to see how much air we can get out and where we get to. And what you find is the marshmallows have expanded. Look at that. We have that they're no longer loose, apart from the ones just at the very top. They're no longer loose. They're all squashed up against each other. Can you see that? Look, they're all on the bottom here, particularly. There we go. Look, get the focus right on the camera. Can you see them all squashed up there? Imagine your internal organs. Imagine your insides expanding and growing, and you growing and expanding. And that is what happened to the crew of Soyuz 11. I know. Why? Well, you can do this at home. If you've got, after the show, if you go and find a cowpole syringe or a little syringe, there's medicine syringes you've got, you can do this yourself. You can do the next couple of experiments myself. You can do it by putting a marshmallow in here as well and doing this. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a vacuum in here. So I'm going to pull that. So I've got my finger over the hole. So you notice when I do that, nothing happens. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull that like that. My finger over the hole, and that has kept the air out of there. And when I let go of that, the plunger goes straight back in. How about that? So if I pull that again and do that again, plunger goes back in. And what's doing that? Is it the vacuum sucking it in, or is it something else pushing the plunger back in? I'll do it again just so you can see. Is it being sucked in or pushed in? Well, of course, your immediate kind of thought is probably, well, vacuums, they suck. In my vacuum cleaner, oh, suck. No, your vacuum cleaner at home doesn't suck. It doesn't. It's a lie. In fact, what's happening is it's the air pressure around us. So as I pull that, I've created a vacuum in here, and the air around us is pushing that back shut. So you think about, if everyone looks up, look up. Yeah, 62 miles of air above your head. There's 62 miles of air sitting on you right now, all the way to space. It's like you're at the bottom of an ocean of air, and it's squashing you. It's squashing your body. You are under air pressure now. If you ever swim underwater in the deep end, you get that, or go diving, you get that extra pressure of the water on your body, and you can feel it. You don't normally feel it here at the bottom of Earth's atmosphere because you're used to it. This is where you're supposed to be. Well, what this shows you is by doing that, by creating a vacuum, the air pressure shuts it back. So you are under air pressure right now. Your body is being squashed. Of course, if we go to space, the squash comes off of your body, and that means that you start to expand. You're no longer being squeezed by Earth's atmosphere, you're being released. And that is what's happened here. If I just take a little bit, there's a little bit of a leak in here, I think. If I just make sure the air's out, you can see what's happened. is the air has been taken out of this bottle, and all the marshmallows have expanded just like your human body. So the crew of Soyuz 11 would have looked like they were 9 months pregnant. I know. And so just to prove that the atmosphere does squashing, I'm going to put the atmosphere back in this bottle. So at the count of 3, 2, 1, I'm going to, let's get the focus on the camera. 3, 2, 1, I'm going to release the pressure and put the pressure back in the bottle. In fact, ready, 3, 2, 1. And we saw the atmosphere there squash the marshmallows back to their, well, beyond their normal shape. Look how small they've got. Look how much. When we started about here, and they grew up to here, and now they're all the way down here, and you see they're look at them a shape. They don't take up as much space at all. Because this is what happened horribly to the bodies of Soyuz 11 as they returned to Earth. Because the atmosphere came back into the capsule, and that's what happened after they were dead. So pretty grim, really. It gets worse though. It gets worse. I need another bottle. Because I need an empty bottle. And this time I'm going to get my no expense spared UK Space Agency flask, which UK Space Agency based in Swindon of all places. Now what I'm going to do, I've got some hot water in here. No, it's not too hot. And I'm going to pour the water into this bottle here, like this. And we're going to do the same thing. So I'm going to, get this near the top, there we go. There we go. Now you might see a bit of steam coming off there. It's about as hot as a sort of good cup of tea. So I can hold that. Ooh, although on a day like today, I don't really want to be that warm. And we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to take my valve, I'm going to put it here like that, and I'm going to put my pump on here, and I'm going to take the air out. This shouldn't take us long, because of course we haven't got all the air around the marshmallows down here. This is water, but there is air in this water. So what we're going to do is take the pressure off and watch what happens to the water. I'll bring it close to the camera. Here we go. Start to see something is happening now. Hopefully what you can see is it's bubbling away in there. Look at that. Can you see it? And what that means is, of course, it's boiling. We are making this bottle of water. I'm holding in my hand a bottle of boiling water. And I'm not screaming, ah! I'm not screaming and agony. Don't do this at home. Don't do this. Don't go and boil some water and hold it, because that'll be 100 degrees. This isn't 100 degrees. This is only about 50 or 60 degrees. It's like a nice sort of warm cup of tea. And it hasn't got any hotter from boiling. It's boiling because I've taken the pressure off. Unlike the marshmallow, it's expanding. You can see the bubbles. See the bubbles? And if I put the pressure back in, they stop, and it stops boiling because the atmosphere is now pushing down on the water, preventing it from expanding. And this is, wow, that's a great experiment, Paul. Thank you very much for showing me that. But what it is about is actually what happens to the human body in space. Not only do you expand and organs get bigger and your whole body expands, but actually all the fluids in your skin, the blood near the surface, your eyeballs, and things like that, all start to boil. Yeah, not 100 degrees, at 37 degrees at your body temperature. It's really gross. So this is why we wear, and I'm going to try doing the share thing again now. Here we go, let's try that again. Is this going to work for me? No, of course it's not. We'll move on to the next slide anyway. Hopefully you can see a picture of one of these suits in action. This is how this works. You have a bubble of air around you. See, this is the so-called pressure suit. And of course it allows you to breathe and things like that, and you've got protection from temperature changes and things like that. But the main thing is applying pressure over your entire body. And that is why you wear a spacesuit, is in order to make the kind of pressure over your body similar. It's actually less than the atmosphere of Earth. It's quite a low pressure, but it's like being up in sort of about 10,000 feet. But it's enough air pressure to push on your body to prevent you expanding and boiling away, which is not what you want to happen. So, if, by the way, you would like to do this, and you need to be very careful, be very, very careful. Adults need to supervise this, but you can do this experiment by pouring a little bit of water in there. You can put a marshmallow in here and make it expand by doing that, but if you get your little cowpole syringe and get a little bit of water there, look, if I just stop the share again, like that. If you watch that, look, if I do that, you can see it's boiling away in my syringe. I'm holding a syringe of boiling water. Do that again by reducing the pressure on the water in my syringe. Here we go, yeah, like that. You can see it boiling in there. You can hold a syringe of boiling water. Now, don't make it boiling water. Don't do it at 100 degrees Celsius. That's a rotate. Do it without adult supervision. Do it with a sort of the temperature of a cup of tea. And don't squirt your water around everywhere. Just be very careful, but use a cowpole syringe, and you can make water boil in your hand. You can put a marshmallow in there, and then pulling with the thumb over the hole, you can make the marshmallow expand and demonstrate what happens to you when you go to space without spacesuit. So let us clear the decks, because what we need to do now is go to space and look at, let me share this screen with you. Of course, all sorts of technical difficulties, but we shall persevere. And what we've got here, hopefully you should see a nice picture of Tim. Tim's on the space station there doing a spacewalk, and he's got a very different spacesuit here. This is the spacewalk spacesuit. This is the suit that you need to go outside. Really, it's a one-person spaceship. This costs about £2 million and has got a visor and utility belt and oxygen tanks and cameras and lights and radios, and it's the most incredible piece of equipment. But the one thing that is no different to this spacesuit is, of course, how you go to the toilet in it. Because, of course, if you think about that, I'm not going to be able to open my spacesuit. Neither does Tim. And pipes don't really work in the same way in space. You can have a little bag and a pipe. It's just going to get messy. It's not going to work. It's actually nappy time. You wear a nappy under a spacesuit, which it makes it less than glamorous, frankly. It makes it very convenient. That's better. But you have to wear a nappy under a spacesuit. Yeah, all those pictures you've seen of astronauts, they're all wearing nappies. They don't tell you that at NASA, do they? You know what Tim's wearing a nappy there. You saw Buzz Aldrin on Luke, he's wearing a nappy. That's the only way you can go to the toilet in a spacesuit. So there's a little nugget there. So what's the space station like? Well, we're going up to the space station, and it's been described as the messiest teenager's bedroom ever. I'm sorry, there's probably teenagers out there, but you're smelly. You do smell. You do. Your younger brothers and sisters are probably agreeing with me. You do smell. And your bedrooms are a mess, probably. And it's like the space station. So basically, you could claim that actually you're just trained to be an astronaut by being a teenager. And one of the reasons is that there's no shower, there's no bath, there's no deodorant. And they do 2 hours of gym every day. And you can't take enough clothes to last you for 6 months. You can't take 6 months worth of underpants. Imagine the pile of underpants that would last you for 6 months, because there's no laundry in space. You can't wash your clothes. So this means you get records like Tim's own personal record was 11 days in the same pair of pants, 25 days in the same pair of trousers. I know. And these 2 hours of gym, people have sweaty bodies up there. They do wash, they do clean. It's a hygienic place. But of course, 6 adults in a very small space. You can't open the window, clearly. It's going to get a bit pongy up there. And there's loads of experiments. Look at this picture. There are experiments and things everywhere. It can get very, very messy and untidy up there. So what we're going to do is, of course, just quickly before we come into re-entry and we come home again, just mention, hey, go to the toilet. Because you don't wear a nappy all the time. And here is the toilet. Now, of course, you think about how you went to the toilet today. Gravity helped you. Earth has helped you. Go to the toilet. It poured it down to the ground. Hopefully not the ground, hopefully into the toilet. You know what I'm talking to. Person out there. Clear up after yourself. But here the toilet. You have the pipe for weeing in, that yellow thing. You take that and you hold it to where you have a wee, and there's a little fan, a little switch on the side. It turns on and sucks your wee away, because gravity is not going to do it for you. Otherwise, you'll have wee floating around in the space station around you. And then the toilet, you need to hold on to that. You can't sit on the toilet. You'll just float away. And you poo into that bag. Can you see the bag in the hole in the middle there? You poo into that, and then it gets tied up and pushed into that bucket underneath. And that is how you go to the toilet in space. Of course, what happens to it? Well, the poo, that bucket, after about 10 days, gets put into a capsule and eventually burnt up in Earth's atmosphere. The wee goes to that panel under the floor and gets turned into their drinking water. Yes, it's recycled. 93% of their water, including the sweat that comes off their body during gym that goes into the vents, is all turned back into their drinking water. Nappies, recycled wee for your drinks, no deodorant, no laundry, 25 days. It's not sounding great, is it? It's not the glamorous thing you think it is. The views are amazing. What we're going to do is come home, and in our last few minutes, we're going to look at how you get this capsule, which carries 3 people, a Soyuz capsule, back down to Earth. Okay, and you see, most of this is going to be. I want you to have a look at this picture now, because I'm then going to show you what it looks like when it's returned to Earth. And this is what it looks like when it's returned to Earth. And what you can see, it's all horribly burnt. It's all horribly burnt, and it's very small. It's about the size of a smart car inside. There's 3 of you packed in there. And the question is, so I stop the share, and this is so we can do our last experiment. There we go. How did the astronauts survive? How did they survive this venture? Because why is it burnt? Everyone rub your hands together. Rub your hands together really quickly. Get that friction. You get that kind of friction on your hands. And of course, partly it's as the capsule hits the atmosphere and the air rushes past the capsule, it's going to heat the capsule up. It also squashes the air. So like with a bicycle pump, when you pump a bicycle pump, it gets hot because as you squash air, as you compress gas, it gets hotter as a sort of rule in physics. So the combination of the friction of the air and the pressure changes as the capsule squashes the air as it hits the atmosphere at 9,000 miles an hour, heats the capsule up to 1,740 degrees. 1,740 degrees. It's an incredible temperature. Iron melts at 1,300. How did the astronauts survive 1,740 degrees? They should be dead. We should have cooked them. How does it work? Of course, there's insulation. You saw the capsule, but it's not that big. You can't put enough layers of insulation. Something else has to happen. And this is our last little experiment. I need my torch device here, because what we're going to do is we are going to simulate re-entry. I'm going to bring this down here, and we're going to simulate re-entry. I've got my toasting fork here. What we're going to do, I'm going to put some gloves on, and we are going to put two astronauts through the torture of re-entry. Now, you can tell I was never going to be a doctor because I never get these things on properly, especially these ones, which are the cheaper ones, because of course you can't get the decent ones at the moment, rightly so, because they're all going to important people who are protecting us from the virus. So right now I've got some very cheap vinyl ones, which are really rubbish for this, especially when you're sweaty. So I'm just struggling to get my glove on. It'll be enough. There we go. But what we're going to do is I'm going to take two bits of chocolate here, okay? These are my astronauts, okay? 2 bits of chocolate, here they are. Examine them. What I'm going to do, I'm going to put one in my hand, like that. And that's going to get heated, like that, to 37 degrees Celsius. 37 degrees Celsius is human body temperature. We all know what happens to chocolate. This is like a controlled experiment. This demonstrates this is normal chocolate, there's nothing special about it, and this is what will happen. This one, I'm going to put here. And then I'm going to get my burner, and I'm going to cook it at what is basically the same temperature as that spaceship, 1,700 degrees. So, how am I going to save my astronauts? Well, I need a space capsule, and here it is, my 2 giant marshmallows. I'm going to put my astronaut in here, and you're thinking, oh, he's going to make a s'more. What's he doing? There we go, look, there's like that, and I'm going to get the other one to make the other end of the capsule. There we are, look, the chocolate in there. So, put that all in, and then ram it onto the skewer of science, and then we shall simulate re-entry. Got my other capsule in here, it's all in there, and we're going to come rushing into the atmosphere at 1,700 degrees here, 9,000 miles an hour, impacting on the air, increasing the pressure, setting fire to the capsule. It's not going to make a s'more because this is far too hot, far too intense heat. Burn, 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 burn. Capsule's on fire, rushing down. Lots of vibration. We lose radio contact with the astronauts because of this sort of hot plasma around the capsule, so we get a period of radio silence. And then I'm going to stop before I set fire to the smoke alarms. And what you should see here is my capsule looks a lot like the one you saw in the picture. It's all blackened. And this stuff, of course, is carbon. This is carbon. You're made of carbon. Diamonds are made of carbon. The graphite on your pencil is made of carbon. Well, some of this carbon breaks off. The spaceship rushes through the atmosphere. That's carbon on the outside of the spaceship. That's called ablation. And it takes some of the heat energy away. But of course, I grab my broken glove, the one I broke trying to get it on. What's happened? Well, if I get my thing again, look what happens now. It's not burning. It's not burning anymore. And that's because it's carbon. Carbon in this form is basically fireproof. And what we've done is create a fireproof layer around the spaceship. What we saw with that black layer that was on that spaceship, that's the final layer of protection. So if I take my capsule apart here, like that, put that out of the way, what you should see is my chocolate astronaut is absolutely fine. If I open up my other one, it really, really isn't. 37 degrees, 1,700, that's how you get an astronaut back. You create a layer of carbon around the outside of the spaceship. That reflects the heat away, so you basically burn the spaceship to save the spaceship. Yes, there's layers of insulation. Yes, there's air conditioning. Yes, they're wearing a spacesuit. But in the last, the thing that protects the spaceship from disintegrating and melting is the fact that it gets covered in its own carbon from burning. And that saves the astronauts and gets us back safely. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of our journey to space. You have been fabulous. Hope you enjoyed it. Bye-bye.